really is just an addition to what you were saying about modeling, is to teach them that forgiveness and grace is part of a larger picture and effort.
Well, hey, everybody. Ooh, I'm not going to lie. I like this a lot. I like this theme
Feels
music.
very relaxing.
It does.
Feels like we should be on vacation.
And I need to be a little bit relaxed because we've had a little bit of an eventful morning in here today. We won't go into all the details.
So much weirdness.
We won't go into all the details, but we're not perfectionists by any means.
That's for sure.
But we've had to start a couple times because we were way off the mark.
We had some technology challenges.
All sorts of things.
But there's a lot of things going on here. We
Yes.
have mics, we have audio, we have wires, we have cameras, we have lighting, and it's all being orchestrated for us by producer Chris.
Who is, to be fair to producer Chris, which is part of the reason why we had some technical difficulties. He's not a producer. He doesn't understand microphones and cables any more than me and you do. He's a pastor who got suckered into. Not only is he a pastor, he's our pastor to parents here at the church.
Yes.
And yet we hardly ever let him talk on the parent podcast.
I know, he's like stuck behind
He's
with the
stuck
wires.
behind, and he's our
But you know, if you text parents,
the word parents.
to 83,000, it's up
Yes.
on our screen behind us. You actually get information alerts or new blog post alerts. And a lot of these amazing, quick encouragements, blog posts to parents are written by our pastor, Chris.
Exactly.
Pastor for our parents.
The podcast is just one of a plethora of resources we provide for parents.
Yes.
And Chris is he's the brain power and the heart and the pastor behind all of it other than the podcast.
Yeah, and it's really helpful and encouraging just to get those text messages. Hey, a new blog post is up, and you go, and it's not long, it's short, and super helpful.
Yeah. Here's a little premature plug. I'm nervous to even say it.
Oh, what
but
is
Chris
it going to be?
may or may not actually be working on a book for parents that ties in the on-purpose parent strategy.
That is amazing. I did not know that.
I shouldn't have said that, but I'm kind of glad I did because
you
now
shouldn't have said that to the world.
Now he has to do it.
That's amazing.
He's a very good writer.
Sign me up.
He's a very good.
Right.
Okay, enough of Pastor
All
Chris.
right,
Enough of that guy.
Thank you.
This is our podcast. It's not the Chris show. Crying out loud. Okay.
Back to us now.
So here's, if you've been a listener of the podcast for any amount of time, you know that we have a little bit of a rhythm where we do a series somewhere between 2 and 4 episodes on a given topic. And then we reach into the mailbag and answer some questions. And then there's always a question that we feel like, oh, we can't just lump that in with the other 4 or 3. So we then do a longer one-off question. And then we go back into a series. So we go series, Q&A, one-off.
Yeah.
Series, Q&A, one-off. That's kind of our routine. We like that.
Got a little rhythm going.
So today is a Q&A. So Chris, you've reached into the mailbag. Parents can send us their questions at
parents@saddleback.com.
Parents@saddleback.com. If you have any questions or just recommendations for subject matter, we try to dip into those as often as we can. Today's no different. We got 3 questions. Tee us up, Chris.
Yeah, so the first one's actually from a dad, which, by the way, we looked at, the last few months. Yes?
I know where you're going, and it blew my mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, it's not my podcast.
Let's see if you guys are thinking the same thing.
We're thinking the same.
Are you sure?
Yes, because
I think I know what you're going to
it
say.
blew your mind,
It
too.
did blow
scared
my
me
mind.
and I forgot.
Now you forgot.
No, you know the stat.
It's like 60%.
69.
Yeah,
Wasn't it
70.
69.
Yeah.
I think 69.
It was
Yeah.
more than just close to 50.
Yes.
Yeah. So like 69% of our watchers on YouTube are watchers.
Oh, so it's not overall. It's just YouTube.
Just those who watch on YouTube.
Oh, that's different.
Yeah.
then.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
Are men.
They're men.
That makes more sense. I think guys are more YouTube than women.
Yeah.
I think. I thought it was
Interesting.
69% of the overall audience.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Yeah,
Because
just-
YouTube is our smallest audience.
Right.
So 69% of our smallest audience is men.
Yeah, most people
Okay. Well, hey,
most
still.
people are listening on Apple.
Yeah. Spotify.
Yeah, and
all
Spotify.
the
Those are the
places.
two big ones. Google a little bit.
Can we ever find out what percentage those are?
Yeah, I'll look into
Maybe
that
figure
for
that
sure.
out. Okay.
Yeah,
There we go.
That'll be cool.
Why are
But
we
this,
talking
but this is for a dad.
tonight? This is a rough. Do we need to do take number 14 or whatever?
15.
All right, let's keep going. What's the first question? It's from a dad.
Listen to the dad's heart.
Okay.
How can I prepare my child to handle peer pressure?
That's a great
big
question.
one. That's a big one.
Okay, well, I'll jump in first for this one. And the thought that I had was maybe a phrase that we can share with parents to help remember. For me, it's this little phrase, this define, prepare, and be awkward. So let me explain what I mean by that. So first, define. I think it will be really important as parents if you are concerned about peer pressure, or maybe not even super worried, but just want to equip your kids to define what peer pressure is. I do think as parents, sometimes it's easy to take for granted that kids don't need us to tell them things and explain things or articulate things because maybe they aren't as responsive, or we think it's obvious, like, oh, everyone knows what peer pressure is. People are talking about it. But there is power when parents take the initiative and are intentional to defining things for their kids. And so first, just even defining what peer pressure is helps kids prepare for it. Like, what exactly is it? Peer pressure is when you feel pushed to do something to be valued and accepted by your friends. And there could be positive peer pressure. There could be negative peer pressure. So you can start off, I would say, having a conversation with your kids about, like, here is the definition of peer pressure. Let's brainstorm. What are some situations where you might have positive peer pressure? What are some situations where you imagine you might have negative peer pressure? Hear from your kids. Talk about it.
Yeah, it's good.
And then that leads into being able to prepare for those situations. Maybe your kids, and it'll be different depending on what age group we're talking about, but you can start taking that conversation and expand it and go in deeper and say, okay, if you were in this situation that we just brainstormed, where someone is peer pressuring you to make fun of the new kid, I don't know, something like that. Like, everyone is like kind of teasing this new kid. How might you respond? Like, what are some ways that we might, that you might actually, what would you do in that exact situation?
Yeah.
And then you could role play. There's so much information and advice out there in the parenting world that talks about the power of role playing, because what you're doing is you are letting them practice something that they're going to experience in the real world in a non-pressure situation, where in the real world it will be a high pressure situation where they won't have that much time to be reflective.
Yep.
So for example, pressure just makes us lose our marbles a little bit. So if I said, okay, Kurt, I'm going to ask you
I don't like
to,
where this is going.
you already feel the pressure.
I don't like where this is going.
I want you to recite the alphabet backwards.
Gotcha.
Okay?
Yes.
As far as you can without making any mistakes. Okay? Ready? In 5 seconds. Or in 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, faster. Do it faster.
ZYXW, RQ,
Smoother.
CDB,
No.
CDB, CBD.
CDB?
Is that some kind of is that some kind of medicinal CBD oil, or I don't know what am I
CBD.
What am I talking? I don't know what I'm talking about.
That was ZYX. I think
I got
you got
like the
three?
first 4. Yeah.
You got 4? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a super silly.
ZYXW.
CYXW. Huh? Okay, all right. You got the 4. My point is, anything that's like maybe even simple, when you're under a pressure situation, it like makes you not think clearly.
Right.
And so the power of role playing with your kids is, if you talk about it in advance, is okay, if everyone's making fun of somebody, what could you say? Actually giving them words, and let's practice it. And it can be kind of fun and silly, can really help in that moment of pressure to be able to think, as opposed to just go with the path of least resistance, which is what often happens with peer pressure.
Right.
And the last thing I'll say about be awkward part is teach your kids that feeling awkward is not wrong. and that there's nothing wrong with them. They may not like fully accept it at first, like, I know, mom, ugh, I still don't like it. But having your voice in their heads is still really important, I think, that we can do as parents. So to say, yeah, if you stand up to your friends for something that's not right, you may feel really awkward or embarrassed, or the circumstance might be a little bit awkward between you and your friends. But trust me, that feeling's not going to stay with you forever. You're going to come home. We're going to eat dinner. We'll watch a movie. It will pass. Don't make rash decisions just to avoid that feeling of awkwardness, because to a young person or to a teen or even upper elementary, more that age range, awkwardness is like a terrible feeling with friends. And you'll do whatever to avoid embarrassment or attention to yourself. And so we're trying to equip them verbally. It's okay. It's not going to kill you.
You're right. And it is going to be awkward.
It's going to be awkward.
If you don't give in to the negative peer pressure, it's you're creating an awkward situation for yourself. So acknowledge that. I love that, Grace. That's such great insight. A couple quick thoughts that come to my mind is, one, I love that the dad's asking this question because he may know this or he may not know this, but when we ask, I've worked with kids and teenagers for, I don't know, 35 years or something.
It's amazing.
And when we ask them what are some of the bigger challenges, almost always peer pressure is way at the top of the list. So, Dad, thanks for asking that, because you are proactively helping your children deal with something that they are going to self-identify as a really big deal to them. So a couple thoughts. One real quick is just the reminder, and I don't know how old the parents or the children of this dad are, but so much of preparing our kids is prepare them, which means ahead of time.
Right.
So a lot of your preparing your preteen to handle peer pressure is building a sense of self-confidence and a sense of right and wrong. And if you're a follower of Jesus, a biblical worldview, and kind of having those conversations all along the way, so that when peer pressure starts to show up, they're kind of just innately a little bit more confident, a little bit more equipped to talk about it. It's easier said than done, but it's sort of like the sex talk. Parents are always like, when do I have the sex talk? When do I have the sex talk? And what I always say is, well, you should be having small conversations ongoing from the time there's an appropriate age, appropriateness to little conversations. So you never have to sit down and have the sex talk that's super big and awkward. Kind of same with peer pressure. You don't wait until they come home and going, Dad, what do I do? My friends wanted me to vape after school. And that's the first time they've ever thought about peer pressure. You do the little things along the way that help that. Along with that, sorry, my phone is ringing. This is just a terrible, my phone's ringing. Because I'm using my,
I can hardly hear it.
I'm taking a page out of Grace's book. And she has her little thoughts and notes on her phone. And I like that, so I started doing that myself. But I forgot to mute my phone. I shouldn't. Oh boy,
that's okay. We have Grace for trying new things.
Along with that is keeping the lines of communication open. So yes, you have the small conversations all along about sticking up for what you believe and what's right and wrong and role playing and all the things. And when they come back with a big situation. That's when you've really got to like temper your response. Because if you overreact, hey, Dad, Mom, my friends were pressuring me to vape after school. You need new friends. Oh, you better not have done that. You know that stuff will kill you. It's worse than cigarettes. Then they're going, oh my gosh, like I can never mention anything to my parents again without them freaking out.
Right.
Yeah.
And so now you shut the communication. And one of the best ways for kids to navigate peer pressure is to be able to go to Mom and Dad for input and advice, and some role playing. Hey, what could I have done? Hey, Dad, I don't want to do it, but give me, like, help me. Excuse me. Help me come up with an out.
What are the words I can actually say?
How do I get out of it without losing my friends? But if you just overreact and shut down why were you even tempted to vape? I raised you better than that.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I guess I can't talk to my mom and dad about it. So those are just some of my thoughts on that one.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. It was Chris who was it sent in by.
So What are some practical ways to teach my children about forgiveness and grace?
Oh, man, that's good. Well, Grace, I'm going to lean on you on this one because I really just came up with one. I just came up with one, and my answer is you model it. Modeling is the best teacher in almost everything.
Yeah.
We
So true.
model our kids all kinds of stuff by how we teach our kids all kinds of stuff by how we model it. So if you want to teach your kids about forgiveness and grace, there is almost a bottomless well of opportunities to model forgiveness and grace
Yes.
to your own kids, to your spouse in front of your kids, to the driver who cuts you off when your kids are in the back seat, to the 16-year-old drive-through employee who got your order wrong at Chick-fil-A or wherever it is. All the ways we respond in front of our kids, to all the never-ending ways for us to either be graceful and forgiving or respond in a way that isn't Christ-like or in a way that we don't want our kids to see.
Right.
Just model it. And if you model it, they will learn the value of it and all of its proper uses.
Right. Yeah, that's good. I love what you said. There will be a bottomless well or pit of opportunity because it's so true. Reality is we live in a broken world with broken relationships. We are broken people. And so if you are looking for ways to grow in the ability to forgive and show grace, you will have lots of opportunity because our brokenness is all around us. And so it's almost ironic when people ask questions like this, because it's like, are you sure? Because this is tough work, but it's like such a great thing to want to engage in. My only thing I'll add to that really is just an addition to what you were saying about modeling, is to teach them that forgiveness and grace is part of a larger picture and effort of peacemaking and relationship building. I forget where exactly, but I remember listening to a sermon once that talked about being peacemakers. It was about the Beatitudes. And there was this one point that said, oh, peacemakers, it sounds kind of like smooshy, like, oh, you're just like a nice person. Maybe you get walked over. You're just keeping the peace. You don't rock the boat. But what this message was saying was, no, peacekeepers are hardcore. They will like lean into when something's not right. Let's talk about it. Let's do the hard work of conflict resolution. Let's do the hard work of searching our souls to forgive someone. Maybe not be in the same kind of relationship as we were before if trust was broken, but I'm going to let go of bitterness. I'm going to let go of resentment. All of that stuff that's involved. And that you have to be a warrior to do that. And you have to be tough. And so couple ways that you could do this with your kids is, one, teach your kids how to do conflict resolution. I believe I've talked about this once before in a previous podcast episode, but we have Karis and Zoe, my two daughters, 11 and 8 right now, do a lot of that. Ever since they were a lot younger, do this almost routine when they get into a larger conflict. Where one side is hurt or they're both hurt at each other. And just the simple pattern is, first, they get a little bit of a breather. So they calm down a little bit if their emotions are super high. And then when things are calmed down, they have to sit, face each other, and they have to talk it out. And the pattern of talking it out is, let's say it was you and me, Kurt. Kurt, you would have to share your side of what you felt, and I have to be quiet, and I have to listen. And then when you're done, I have to repeat back to you what I heard without interjecting my own, side commentary. So Kurt felt sad when blah, 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 I did this. And then you have a chance to clarify. And then the role switches. Then I get to say, well, I was mad because, and then you have to say, I think Grace was mad because X, Y, Z. And we clarify. And then at the end, we talk about, well, what can we do different? And usually it ends with like a joke or hugging or laughing it out. And it seems like that's very prescriptive, and I'm not saying every parent has to do that, but for our family, we've been teaching that particular model of conflict resolution. And because we've done it so much, like the girls now know those steps. So they will sometimes do it on their own. And they're like, yeah, we fought, but we talked it out. Here's what happened. Here's what Zoe was feeling. Here's what Kara's feeling. We resolved it. Can we go play now? And we're like, oh, okay.
Yep.
But it's teaching forgiveness, not as an isolated thing, but in this context of building relationship with one another. That's going to be a part of being interdependent.
Yes.
And the last thing I'll say too is, to your point, Kurt, is to not just teach your kids conflict resolution skills. There's a lot of other, methods out there that you could look into, but to, like you said, model the resolution of a real live conflict in your family, maybe between you and your spouse, to show that to your kids. So what I mean by this is, a lot of times kids see conflict happen in the home. They know that it happens. They see the tension between parents, but they don't see the resolution.
Right.
So they learn all these different things. Maybe that's not something parents actually want to be teaching their kids, but they learn by real life practice. So it could be, in our family, when there's conflict, it's whoever yells the loudest wins. In our family, when there's conflict, you shut down and nobody ever talks about it again. And over time, it just goes away, and that's how we deal with conflict. But as a couple, if you can show your kids the actual conclusion to a conflict, it is incredibly empowering to those kids to know, conflicts happen, they're normal, and there can be a resolution. So Sam and I sometimes will, and it's a real fight if we're having a real argument, but maybe not one of like the huger ones, but like a medium-sized one where we're still feeling emotional about it. But it's something where we're in control of ourselves. Maybe at dinner time, we'll be like, hey, should we talk about this? And the kids are sometimes like watching like, oh my gosh, this is awkward. And we will actually talk it out in front of them. And it won't always be easy, but we'll resolve it in front of them. Like, okay, all right, I understand. I forgive you. Okay. And we'll get to that conclusion. And if you are able to do that, maybe it doesn't have to be with your spouse. Maybe it's with, some other family member. If you could show and model the conclusion of a conflict, that is an incredibly powerful gift to give to your kids to see in real life.
Yeah. Man, oh man, Grace, you're talking, I'm thinking, I just love how intentional you are. Mm-hmm. In almost every topic we talk about, you are constantly talking about, well, we role play and we get feedback and we have them practice. And I think about my own daughter and her husband, and their kids are much younger. Yeah. But that's you can tell that's kind of the approach they're going after, versus, the way I was raised, and even my answer to this. Well, you model it. If you want to teach your kid and model this, and to me, modeling it is more like, well, you just forgive and move on. Yeah. Right. It's almost like it's so easy to say, hey, get over it.
Right.
Hey, she didn't mean it. Your sister didn't mean it. So deal with it. Like, forgive her and move on. And as opposed to, because that's not conflict resolution. Maybe the upside to that approach is, you're not quite so sensitive, and not everything bothers you. And, I'm old school. We don't have to talk about everything. My goodness. Does everything require role playing and conflict resolution? And good grief. Can't we just go, hey, my bad, let's move on? Yeah. Right. Well, yes. They're yes to that. And no to that, right? Because there are times where we need to talk it out and express what was hurtful and identify the pain point, because sometimes you can't really, when I say you can't really ask for forgiveness, you can ask for forgiveness, but if you don't really understand what the offense was,
right,
then it's like, then I'm minimizing. Hey, Grace, just, you forgive me, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that was really hurtful what I said. Mm-hmm. Wow. So your forgiveness of me is actually a pretty powerful thing.
Right.
And it's not as easy for you to extend to me as I just assumed it would be.
Yeah.
Because you express. So anyway, all that to say, well, I like it all.
I kind of think
good wisdom.
It's a yes and to your thing too, because you need those small moments in life where you're like, you know what, this person cut me off on the freeway. I'm not going to sit down and have a face-to-face talk with them about my feelings, but I'm going to model to my kids, you know what? Oh, I feel so irritated, but I'm going to forgive them. Even them seeing that process, modeling that's important. It's those little things that build up, and then having those more intentional
Yeah.
conversations
So
as well peppered in.
We're both talking about modeling it. Sometimes you model it more intentionally
Right.
and more in depth than other times.
Yeah.
But we're always modeling it
That's right.
one way or the other. Okay, last
Yeah.
question, Chris.
Awesome.
What do I do when my kids have questions and doubts about their faith that I don't know how to answer?
Ooh.
Something tells me I'm gonna have a short answer to this, and Grace is gonna have a profound answer.
Short can be profound.
should-
Sometimes short is more profound.
You know what? Why don't I go first?
Okay.
We'll save the good stuff for the end. Here's what I would say to that is, first of all, doubts, parents, mom and dad listening, doubts are good. So don't freak
right.
out. Oftentimes, Christian parents freak out at the moment their son or their daughter, it often happens in like the preteen years. Why do we believe what we believe? Or how do I know the Bible's true? Or if God's so good, why A, B, C, or D? I don't know if I believe everything the church is teaching me, right? And we freak out as parents. Oh my gosh, they're going to go off the deep end.
Right.
They're going to walk away from their faith. They don't, right. So, because the Bible says so, when they're second grade, that answer works. All of a sudden that answer doesn't work and they're expressing doubts and we can freak out. So parents, you've got to recognize doubting is a good thing. Because when you doubt, that means you're asking questions. If your children, they're going to wrestle through their faith sooner or later. I think sooner and in relationship and communication with mom and dad is way better than later when they're off at college and they don't have mom and dad to process those doubts and those questions. So when they start doubting, embrace it. Embrace the doubt. Go there with them. And so I would encourage mom and dad to say, you know what? I'm really glad you're asking those questions. I'm proud that you're taking your faith in Jesus serious enough to wonder.
Right.
Because I think it will stand up to all your questions. So don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to doubt. Don't be afraid to wonder. That's a good thing. Two super duper practical responses if they're expressing doubt. One would be to say, even if you know the answer. This one is even if you know the answer. Because just giving the answer just kind of shuts off the conversation. I would recommend you say, ooh, that's a great question. Let's figure that out together. What do you think?
Great. Yeah.
What could we read? What could we watch on YouTube? Where could we go to do some research? How can we let's discover that together. How do we know God made the world in 6 days? Were they literal days? Were they not literal days? That's a great question. What do you think? Let's discover that together. Let's research. Let's figure that out together.
Yeah.
Awesome. The other real easy answer, when you don't know the answer, if your child says, well, it's okay to say, you know what? I don't know. Let me think about that. Let me talk to some people and I'll get back to you.
Yeah.
I call that research and return. I'm going to go research it and I'm going to return to you with some thoughts. That's okay too.
Yeah.
We don't have to have all the answers all the time. It's okay for our kids to see that we have questions. We have some doubts.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely.
We don't know all the answers. We think we know. We believe certain things about theological and doctrine and worldview, and they're based in Scripture. We think, we hope, we want them to be. And sometimes it's okay to say, I'm not totally sure. I've wondered myself.
Yeah.
There are other opinions on this, and that's okay. I don't think the goal of parenting on every topic is to make our kids align 100% with our view on everything.
Right.
There's probably a handful of Christian categories we go, oh man, these are really important. I sure do want them to get this. Outside of that handful, it's probably very, very okay for them to land, which is why it's safe for them to think about it and read and ask questions and research and doubt and wrestle it through and see where you land.
I love that. Yeah, that even hearing you talk about that, Kurt, feels so safe. And it feels like if I was a kid struggling, or even an adult coming and saying, "Hey, Kurt, like, well, I don't know how to think about this," it feels like it's not defensive.
Right.
It's not like you're hiding something broken and then have to be on guard, which sometimes when our reaction to doubt is so aggressive, it almost plants more doubt. Like, whoa,
Right.
that person is,
Right.
even if it's not conscious, like as a kid, it might be like, ooh, that this
Right.
might not be stable.
And how are they so certain about something that obviously isn't that clear?
Without a clear answer,
right.
Like it just is.
It just is.
It just is, you
Right.
know? And so actually my point is just affirming what you said, because I had the exact same point about I literally wrote, don't freak out, but encourage doubt. Is I've had so many conversations with friends, and I feel this too intuitively in my own experience, where ironically the things where people that I know that fell away from the faith or not interested in the faith will talk about having questions when they were younger and it was shut down. And so that just led to I don't buy it.
Right.
I don't believe it. And it's interesting. There's actually people who research this. Dr. Kara Powell, and she's at I think leads the Fuller Youth Institute or works there. One of the things in their research that they discovered, the biggest reason kids who grew up in the church leave the church is not doubt. It's unexpressed doubt. It's having it in your head, but it's not accepted to say it out loud because either your parents or your teachers or whoever are going to react like either shaming you or without a satisfactory type of response that it's too, that causes them to then hold it within themselves. And then when they go to college, it's like, you know what? It's there. Even if I didn't express it, my doubt was there.
Right.
And I feel like it wasn't answered and I don't believe it.
Yep.
And I really loved what you said, Kurt. It being able to have your doubts addressed is not necessarily having all the answers or having the answers even after you do the research. Part of it is being able to learn that in faith, there is always going to be this mixture of unanswered questions and answered questions. And to be able to be in that space and still figure out how to have faith and connect with God, that can be incredibly powerful.
Yep. That's good.
And so the last thing I'll say is, along with what you said about encouraging them, is at the end of the day, as parents, we need to remind ourselves we want our kids' faith to be real, to be authentic. And if we shove their questions into, under the cover or shame them for questions or freak out or make them like, kind of not ask because they see how panicked it makes us, we're not encouraging them to be real.
Right.
We're trying to make them into some sort of image that makes us feel better.
Yep.
But it's not authentic. And at the end of the day, I think about like the story of the prodigal son, where the dad let the son go off and live the lifestyle that he was living and was squandering, his life inheritance. But the dad was there, ready to welcome the son back. And there is this quote in Christian parenting that says, this researcher discovered that when kids walk away from their family's faith, the most important factor that led to their return was their perception that their parents kept a loving and open relationship that remained warm and tolerant throughout the struggle. It was not logical arguments or religious practices of parents. So at the end of the day, we want our kids' faith to be real. And sometimes that means letting them struggle, but being a parent that makes sure the kids know, I don't love you just because you believe what I believe.
Yep.
I love you no matter what.
Right.
And I will be here for you through your ups and through your downs, whether you believe or you don't believe. I'm here for you.
Yep.
And let's research and return, or let's do these things together. And I think at the end of the day, it's really tough as parents if that's a season that some parents are in where their kids are actually walking away from their faith. But that's something we can hold on to as something that God will hold us through as well.
So of everything you said, the thing that jumps off the page, so I want you to read it one more time. if you're a parent who has older children wandering away, the number one thing that brings them back is not religious arguments and law. Read that part
Yes.
again, because that's so big.
Yeah, it says that the important factor that led to their return. So this is research of kids that actually wandered
and
but then came back. And in that research, it was their perception that their parents kept a loving and open relationship that remained warm and tolerant throughout the struggle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Powerful. We're gonna end it with that.
Good.
That's solid. Everybody, thanks for joining us. If you want to check out previous videos, you can check those out right here and right here. And if you would like to subscribe to the podcast, you can do so right here. We will see you next time.
Oh, now.